My name is Joe. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Again, welcome to the Thursday night Big Book Study Workshop. We go through the first portion of the basic text as outlined by the first 100 men and women. And how we open up this meeting is with the set-aside prayer. Dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, my illness, these steps, and especially about you, dear God, so that I might have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. Awesome.
Right on. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony.
Tony.
Sobriety date's April 8, 1989. Welcome. Glad you guys are a part of this. Walk through this. Pretty exciting times. If you kind of know about the process, you should be pretty excited about where you are at in it, right? A lot of people who really don't understand the process. You ever hear people talk about the four-step? It's like a death sentence. It's just like they're ready to, do penance or something like that. It's like this homage. It's like wait till you do your four-step. Whoa, all these bullies. Anybody hear that and get this big hype about the four? And you hear people say, I'm working on my four-step, and their face is so long because they're working on they don't know the essence of it, right? If you knew the essence of what the four-step is, it is kind of really an exciting time in your development and your process, because you got to kind of, where we're at, we're going to kind of look at this in the way the book is laid out. And if you're kind of this type and you're about to start your four-step and you're not excited about that, then you need to go back through the process to refigure out why you're doing the fourth and the purpose of it, right? And so when we kind of look back, we've gone through this in great detail. We made a decision on a couple Tuesdays ago to kind of continue on with the process. So Thursday nights, we go through the application part of this, the working part of this, to bring about this story in our life. So what story are we hoping to bring about is the story of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I do the studies, but I still have a piece of paper, a pen, a highlighter, and I got two books in case I need to make a reference with the other book to make sure it's the same information in it. Right, I have a highlighter. I have everything I need for a successful study, because sometimes I'll see something, I go, isn't that interesting, the way they worded that, or the way they kind of put something in here. It expands on the information that I've already acquired. There's not really anything new. It's like using a table saw, like carpentry, but you get to utilize your tools in a different way to be more productive, right? There's finishing carpentry. And the more you stay in this, the more you'll realize the really what's being kind of presented here. One of the guys in one of the stories talking about, he traded in a bottle for the keys to the kingdom, right? So most people talk about this extraordinary kind of experience that they have experienced as what? As the result of talking about this thing, as the result of going to meetings, as a result of hoping for, as the result of this process, right? And when we went through this, we're going to hit a couple highlights just to get the mindset, what we're talking around in the four-step. How many people are present here right now? By a show of hands. 4 people, that's good. How many people still thinking about their day, thinking about? How many people just take a big breath, show up where your feet are, and kind of say, you know what, I'm going to participate in this study. It could be a game changer. So if you go to page 25, this kind of sets up the whole thing where we're at in the fourth, because we've already gone through this in great detail. We understand the problem from whose point of view?
Theirs.
From theirs. And so we've concurred, or we conceded that we have this same problem. So is it a singular experience now, or is it collective?
Collective.
So see, we become a part of those that put this thing together for people who, like us, like me. I see I'm one of them. And so they talked about a solution and the experience that I had. When they told me about the solution, whose understanding did they tell me? About my own understanding or their understanding?
About their experience.
Their understanding and their experience, how they got this and what they mean by that, right? So on page 25, we see this a collective understanding or approach that they talk about, and we're just going to hit it up here a bit. Who's reading tonight, Joe?
Rob,
my main man from Toronto. What's going on?
I'm doing well, Tony. My name's Rob. I am a recovered alcoholic.
Rob.
And good to see everybody tonight. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation.
We already know you don't like it, but it doesn't mean you can't look forward to it, right?
Exactly. But we saw that it really worked in others.
So that's why we're doing this. We see this worked in others because we have the experience of this thing yet?
No.
But we've done steps 1, 2, and 3. What experience have we experienced?
Nothing.
Only that there's a problem, that there's a solution, and we feel good about the idea of being able to obtain it. And a lot of people mistaken that idea for a spiritual experience or spiritual awakening or connection. Because if I was able to obtain or experience this thing in the first 3 steps, then I wouldn't need to do the rest of the steps, would I? Right? So, okay, go ahead.
But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it.
And we don't need that explained, right? When we're here because we've tried everything. If you found something sufficient enough that worked for you, would you be taking the time to go through a big book study workshop through the guidance of somebody else, or in this case, a group of people who've gone through this process? You'd be looking to them for guidance for what? To go through this, to have a different experience than what you've been having, true or false?
Yeah.
Because we've tried everything. Have we? How many people has tried everything? If there was anything left to try, it'd be on your bucket list in recovery. Let's try feng shui. Let's try yoga. There's got to be something. We've tried everything. We found it didn't work. And what I mean by try everything is we're a group of people that don't want to drink anymore. We're not that group of people that still think we can get away with it every once in a while. We know, like Bill, did Bill want to drink again? No, he didn't want to drink again. Did he drink again?
100%.
100%. So we seen that he was doing acts against him because he has an illness and not a behavioral problem. So one of the things where I was going with this is that even though he knew what the problem was and then he found out what the solution was and he made a decision to do this thing, he continued to drink. Right? It wasn't until he went through this process, the 3rd time in treatment, that he had this transformation. So what we're doing here is the same thing that was done for me and a lot of people in this group. So if you're new to this group, what we're doing is the same thing that the book talks about here. Go ahead.
When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved.
That's us, right? We're presenting this thing. We've had the practical experience of going through this, and we have experienced what they're talking about. We have experienced what we hope for, where some of you are in this process and hoping for this change. We've experienced, so we've been where you're sitting, right? In that hopelessness. So we're saying what they're saying and what you see is true. And it could be the same experience for you, right? So therefore, when we're approached with whom the problem had been solved, not still dealing with it, are these people still dealing with alcoholism, or the problem's been solved? Solved. Big difference. You hear people say, I'm working on my alcoholism. Then you don't understand alcoholism.
100%.
Because step 1 says, if I'm powerless over something, then how can I work on it?
Yeah.
Right? That's like working on an electrical outlet with your tongue. Like it's just ain't gonna work. And like,
wait, Tony, we know the audience we're here. How many people used to put the battery on their tongue here? Be honest, anybody? There we go. That's the type of group we got.
No, it's not the first time. How many people did it more than once because they didn't believe the feeling the first time? That's the right group of people. Okay, you can talk people into doing shit once. But when they do it 2 or 3 times on their own, and then when they see a battery in the garage, a part of them goes, should I? Yeah. And you're testing it by yourself. Then, anyways, that's a whole different topic. With whom the problem had been solved. Now, here's where we're at. Here's where we're at starting the 4. Right? So we see we've already started this process, right? We're at this point. What point?
There was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet.
So we're just starting this process that they've done. We have yet to experience what they're going to talk about yet. But a lot of people have that good feeling and that feeling of hope and mistaken it for an experience. So I call that evangelical recovery. I feel really good about doing nothing, but I feel good about it. Celebrated with a 24-hour chip. Anybody like that here?
Yeah.
Right? And we see there's stories about that same kind of guy in the book, not a cloud on horizon. Never wanted to drink again, right? Felt fantastic about the recovery. And he celebrated with a 24-hour chip, hypothetically, right?
Yeah.
How many people celebrated how well they're doing with a 24-hour chip?
Oh, yeah.
Just baffled, right? So we got that. So what are we hoping for now? That we've made a decision to carry on. We have found what?
We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence, of which we had not even dreamed.
We'll find out later. I interpret it as the fourth dimension is the spiritual realm. We move from an instinct-based living into a spiritual-based living, which is the essence of that makes us a human being. The human experience is that energy field within inside of us, that thing that's always been there that we've kind of diminished. You know, that internal dialogue. Anybody's ever that? Remember when they were a kid at different times they'd come, why don't you do this? We've gone through that in great detail, right? We get reunified with the connection to source or to the world, right? To the universe, to spirit. Okay, go ahead.
The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, and towards God's universe.
So now, hopefully, we've done this. Now that we've done in step 3, we've read the spiritual appendix in the back of the book. Have we not? So we understand what they mean by this psychic change or spiritual experience. And what they talk about there is a singular experience or a collective experience. Collective. So if all these people done the same thing, they're going to experience the same thing. It kind of makes sense, right? If everybody had a plane ticket going to a certain destination and got on the same plane, even though they were coming from all different locations within the city, would they end up in the same place?
Yeah, if they're on the same plane.
That's it. So this is kind of like their itinerary that we're being presented here, right? So they talk about in the spiritual appendix what usually takes place in a few months. Not in a few days, not in a few hours, in a few months. Could have seldom been brought about by years of self-discipline. Why can't we go years? Because of the illness, because of the malady that centers in the mind. If we could go years on working on ourselves, then how many people would be here trying to do this process? Right? So we see that we can't afford to wait because what happens is alcoholism is lying dormant because I haven't had the psychic change or spiritual experience yet. I say I only have 2 alternatives. One is to do this course of action and to obtain this change through the connection that I get to a power greater than myself. So in the spiritual appendix, they said all our members, with few exceptions, have tapped into an inner resource of strength. Do they all understand this resource of strength as the same purpose or the same power?
Yep.
Their conception of it may be different, but it's the same source, something that happens deep down within. And that kind of goes into where we went to, they talk about on page 45, we see that lack of power is our dilemma in regards to fixing ourselves or changing the course of our destination in regards to what? Alcoholism. Because if alcoholism is determining my story and I keep getting loaded, would that not make my life unmanageable?
100%.
So the unmanageability that they actually talk about in step 1 is the inability to stay sober.
Under any and all conditions.
Yeah, right? Our alcoholism is a condition, that means conditioning. Right? So, on page 45, I got a theme going here. On page 45, we see that lack of power is our dilemma. We understand that because they just talked about from page 44 to 45 that if all these philosophies work, like letting go, turning it over, page 417, acceptance, and all that, if that stuff worked for people like us, then we wouldn't need the book anymore, would we?
No.
And so remember in a doctor's opinion, they kind of said we're a little maladjusted, full-fledged morality, and downright mental defectives. Nobody in this group. But they say there are people like that within our fellowship. And those type of people would be like this. I haven't done the work the guy's done on 417, but I want the same experiences he is experiencing by just talking about it. Would that not sound a little crazy? So this guy's gone through a whole process. He has a relationship with a power greater than himself, and he's like, And he's at this place where he's talking about acceptance is the answer to all his problems. But you got to kind of look at the story that brought that about is he just finished arguing with his wife. And if anybody's married here, how many people realize acceptance is the answer to all your problems when it comes to arguing with your wife? Yeah. Yeah. You know how many times I have my own opinion about something? I just keep my mouth shut with my wife. Okay, because I know my happiness is dependent on compliance. The women like that here. The women are going, yeah, and the guys are going, oh, yeah. So when you kind of look at the story there, and he's kind of like saying, I can get no rest until I comply. I cannot find peace until I give in. That's what he's kind of saying. And if you've been married and happy, you know that is the way of happiness. How many guys married here? How many people would find that to be true? There's your ideas and then there's your wife's ideas. Who's the boss in your house? Let's see who's being honest here. How many people say you're the boss, the men? How many people, the wife's the boss? So in my house, I'm the head of the family, but my wife's the neck. Right? You know what supports the head, the neck? What points the neck, right? Anyways,
yeah,
my wife.
Copy that, brother. Copy that.
You're learning. It'll take you a couple more years, but we'll get you there, Joe. Okay, so moving on. So they say, where and how was I to find it? Well, that's what this book is about. So we know that if I do what they did, I'd get this relationship that they talked about. But the first thing that needs to happen is I need to get an experience with this power. Right or wrong?
Yep.
So a lot of people call it God, a lot of people call it this, but a lot of people mistaken their religious convictions or their belief system with the experience. And it's all different things. See, I came in as a true believer. I've been to church. I've been I could spend the last couple hours talking about doctrine, different views, Nazarene, Baptist, Roman Catholic, Charismatic. Like I've been there, done that, trying to find this solution, absent of this process in order to get sober. Anybody ever do that here? I went right to God, but I couldn't connect to that. So I had evangelical moments of just a bliss followed by even worse relapse because I didn't have the recipe to maintain and rid of myself of the things that I've been plagued with. So as we went through this, we started going through we agnostics, and we found out the basis of we agnostics is the same as the conversation that Ebby had with Bill. We see that we agnostic is designed for three groups of people. When you kind of look at it, the true believer, the atheist, and the agnostic are all having the same problem. And what's the same problem that they're all having?
Relapse. They can't stay sober.
Lack of power. Interesting, right? Lack of power is all their dilemma. So we're in how we're all these groups of people, the atheist, the true believer, and the agnostic was to find this power. Well, that's what this book is about. It's enable each one of these people who are alcoholic to experience the same thing, to get access to this power. Well, where and how was I to find this power? That's what this book is about. So on page 54, and we're getting into where I'm going here, because the book builds on itself. It starts you with ideas way back in the beginning, but a lot of people miss it, right? If they're reading through, they don't know how to build on these things. That's where sponsorship comes in, and that's our biggest problem in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous today is poor sponsorship, right? If you have a sponsor that's not using the book to guide you through it, then he's not your sponsor, she's not your sponsor. What they are is your friend. Right? Because the whole idea of sponsorship is a guide to take you through this process so you could have your own experience and in turn sit with this book and take somebody else through it. So we all have the collective experience. Would you kind of agree to that or disagree?
Agree.
And so the guy who saved my life after 11 years in and out, he says, "You show me what you're talking about, Tony." He handed me a big book. He says, "Show me what you're talking." And I couldn't show him what I was talking about. So that was the first indication that all my recovery was not based on had depth and weight. It was all based on things that sounded good, parenting and bumper sticker sobriety. All this stuff that you hear in the fellowship being thrown around nowadays. Keep coming back. This too shall, like, anybody go on chat lines here on all of this parenting stuff that people say to people and all. It's just parenting stuff. So depth and weight. So on page 54, they talk about here our current belief system. That everybody has this belief system, meaning where we spend our energy, where we spend our time, and what do we worship. Right? A lot of people misunderstand that thing of word. They think, oh, what God do we worship? No, what do we worship? What do we worship? We're all worshipers. Meaning, if you were to take a piece of paper and where you spent most of your thinking time, is it in make-believe? Is it in hope? Is it in winning the lottery, this thing or this thing? Is it based on something that's not happening to create a euphoric feeling within inside of yourself? As soon as I get this, as soon as I get that, as soon as I get rid of this, that's a form of worship. Interesting, right? Because where are you spending your energy? On these things. And these things are not working because now when they're not happening, now you become even more irritable and restless and discontent because you can't create the happiness that you seek in the moment that you're living. So you're projecting in all these things in the future that will create happiness, only to be revisited by the reality of the life you're living. Anybody like that here? And then when you're done with that, you got the past always haunting you. So if you're tormented about inability of get these things in the future to make you happy, and you're tormented by all the things in the past that are not making you happy, how's that going to be in living in today's stuff?
Going to be able to.
So you see, that's where they say there's no way of entirely getting rid of self with us because we're plagued with who? Ourselves. What's our first obsession?
Me.
Ourselves. A lot of people may be offended about that, but who you been thinking about all day?
Me.
Right? But I can't shake that, so I create these versions. So on the next page, 55, it talks about where do I find this power? And it's really interesting because you got a lot of these people, well, for me, your conception is your own business. We don't care what your conception is. You got all these people that, oh, I believe in a doorknob as a higher power. Well, you need more help than we got to offer then. Right? Because there's more going on in your psychological thing than you hear this shit in AA that just makes no sense whatsoever. They're very specific what they mean by this power. What's this power? This power has to be accessible. I have to be able to experience. Why? To create this psychic change or spiritual experience. If it was something outside of me, how many people has looked outside of them their whole life for something to fix what's going on inside of them? That's why we loved alcohol. That euphoric thing that turned on us and cut us to ribbons. That's why we like the bump here and all that stuff that we seek turned on us, and then we left there totally dismayed on how we got there by the pursuit of self and being driven by our illness. Interesting, right? So pretty good stuff here. So here they're saying, look at the wording. They're saying a lot of people get upset with this, but you got to listen to the word. It says God as we understand him. Right? You notice when the book talks, when it's talking to you, it'll say you or the reader. How many people realize that, right? So when they say, if they wanted to say, as you understand him, they would have said, as you understand him. They said, as who? As we understand him. Who's the we? Is the people that put this together. And everybody that's gone through it since. Everybody who's gone through this process has the same understanding. And you get people arguing that. What they're arguing is their ignorance on what the book's saying. Right? They're not hearing what the book's saying. So, oh no, it's my own conception. I never said that. Right? We're not arguing your conception. What we're talking about is the collective understanding. What's the collective understanding? The first thing is lack of power is our dilemma. Yes or no? For some of us or all of us?
All of us.
So see, that's a collective understanding. They're saying that we need to get access to this power. Some of us or all of us?
All of us.
Right? And it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously. So we're some of us or all of us?
All of us.
Where were we to find this power? Well, that's what this book is about. So if I did what they did, would I find the same source of power that they're talking about and they've experienced to create the psychic change or spiritual experience?
100%.
So is it collective or singular?
Collective.
So that means now when I'm working with a sponsee, I don't get caught up in my belief system and put stumbling blocks in front of his life. Like I'll use Joe here as an example. So in the beginning, when we talked about a power grid, I never talked about my convictions and my belief system. I talked about what the book talked about. Years later, we're talking more on our conviction level because we share a lot of the same belief systems. But when we work with new people, we don't share that with new people. It will create stumbling blocks in front of them. We get them to the process that the book talks about. So look at the first paragraph here. Actually,
we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God.
So where is this power located that they're talking about that we need to all get access to?
Deep down.
Not for some of us, for all of us who want this solution. If you want what we have and are willing to get any lengths again, then you're ready to take certain steps. If you don't want this solution, then do whatever you want. But don't complain it don't work. But if you want what we have, then you need to understand what we're talking about. What we're talking about is getting access to this power. Where do we find it? Deep down within. And they talked about here, we've gone through this in great detail, but we need to remove the blocks that stand in the way of this relationship that's already there, but it's blocked with all these different things. Does that kind of make sense? So now they're saying it's deep down within, so I know always where to come back to. It's from within me. This power. So I need to get the roadmap on how to get access to it 24/7, 365, and not that feeling of hope every now and then. What I mean by that, how many people remember when they got jammed in, they'd go to a meeting to feel better?
Yep.
How many people remember that? Or you go online or your phones, and then you get some relief by talking to, you get that kind of feeling of hope back and kind of lights you up a bit. How many people have experienced that? They're saying you can get that here 24/7 without going through those external circumstances in order to experience it. Those things still are very helpful and as a part of the process, but you have access to this alone when there's nobody else to be found. You can tap into this 24/7, 365, and it'll be personal to you. Pretty cool, right? So,
Yep.
they talk about here as we went through this, and then we got to page 60. We just finished reading how it works. So we've seen in how it works what they were like before this process on page 58, 59, and their inability to get sober. True or false? Then they said, well, hear this, right? Without help, it was too much for us, right? And then they talk, but there's one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him. So we understand what they mean by God is this power source that lies within. They're okay with the word God now because we've worked through that stuff. Creative intelligence, spirit of the universe. We worked through those prejudice or preconceived ideas, and we agnostics. And what I'm doing is pursuing the solution that's being presented to me, right? I'm not pursuing my own idea. So a lot of people, and you know, like my sponsor does, I don't get it. They say, oh, why don't you write your own conception of God? That's not what it's asking you to do. What it is saying is once we explain the solution to you, choose your own conception, what that means to you. Two different things. You notice when Bill was talking to Abby, when did Abby ask Bill to choose his own conception? Before he talked to him about the solution or after? After. And the basis of Bill's understanding was it was only a matter of being willing to believe. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw in my build what was in my friend, right? Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. What? To do what? To do the process, to have the same experience his friend was having. Not the same religious beliefs. The same experience. Two different things altogether. So we're not selling doctrine here. What we're selling is a spiritual experience based on certain spiritual ideas that we're going to put into practice that will bring about the same result or experience that everybody went before me in order to recover from this thing. How many people find that pretty cool?
It's pretty awesome.
So it's not my idea anymore.
Nope.
None of this is my idea. Right? Because my ideas were killing me. How many people's ideas here were killing them? How many people's ideas here didn't work for them? So they're saying here that we got a whole new process. So I have the same understanding they do on what the problem is, what the solution is, what the course of action to bring this about. So on page 60, they talk about having had this change, and then they talk about these principles that we apply to our human condition. They never talk about the steps again. Anybody ever notice that? Once you had a psychic change or spiritual experience, it's not about working the steps anymore. It's about practicing these principles to stay connected. That idea comes from treatment centers. It's about working 10, 11, and 12. It doesn't say that anywhere in our literature. Nowhere. Treatment centers like that is for people working on self. That's a whole different conversation. So after page 60, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. What's the purpose of the steps? To have the psychic change of spiritual experience. If I don't have that, what's my fate? What's the step one promise?
Drink.
I'm going to drink again. Right? So the only thing that I can do is I have two alternatives. Is to go on to the bitter end because I can't change my fate. I'm here because I'm still under the lash of alcoholism. Just because I'm in a meeting doesn't mean I'm free from it's lying dormant. How many people said to themselves here, I don't feel like drinking, and then you were drinking?
Oh, yeah.
So we see that we can't see, feel, and touch this thing because it's an illness that centers in our mind. Not everybody understands that because there's a big part of the fellowship who's still struggling with the idea whether they can drink or not. They're obsessed with the idea there's got to be some way, somehow. Most of us know there's no way, no how.
Yeah.
Right? And there's got to be a way where I can never take a drink anymore because I'm convinced that I can never drink again. Two different groups of people, right?
Yeah.
Bill was, those who are real alcoholics are convinced they can never drink again.
Yeah.
But how not to is the question, right? Because when I came here, like the first, I never wanted to drink again, but I kept on drinking again over and over and over again. So I never understood the obsession. I work with a lot of guys who think about it all the time. For me, when I thought about it, I thought of all the consequences, all the shit that went with it. But that in itself never stopped me from drinking. Maybe, anyway, a whole different topic.
Yeah.
So from page 60, they start talking about what they mean by being at step 3 and just what do we do. So they answer all these questions. And so what they start talking about is the human experience, the human dilemma. When you get this page 62, they talk about the alcoholic is an extreme example of what? The human dilemma. So we see that we learned, and we agnostics, why shouldn't we apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view? Why shouldn't we apply to our human problems these spiritual principles? You notice it never says anywhere, why shouldn't we apply these spiritual principles to alcoholism? Because can anybody show me where it says in our book that we work on our illness? We work on alcoholism.
Doesn't say it anywhere.
But how many people hear that? I'm working on my alcoholism. I'm working on my isms.
Yeah, I hear it all the time.
What you're working on is your humanism, not your alcoholism. Because how many symptoms are there in alcoholism?
2.
2. So alcoholism is kind of really weird, but it's not a behavioral problem. If I'm an asshole, it's not because I'm an alcoholic. It's just because I'm an asshole. Right? So you hear people say, I was an alcoholic before I even drank. You mean you were an asshole before you even drank?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Right? Being an asshole is not one of the symptoms in alcoholism.
No.
Right? But we'd all qualify then, wouldn't we? No, I've never drank. I heard you're just an asshole, so I could be a member of AA. No? Okay, anyways. I have these moments. Joe, you're supposed to reel me in. So,
that's Rob's job.
Oh, Rob. So they say, so here, on page 62, we've read it in great detail. We're not going to cover it. And we've covered page 63, what it looks like when they started this process. And then they say we are now at step 3. We see step 3. We're going to read it again. Is an idea being presented here. A lot of people think it's something you experience in step 3. This prayer is a summary of things we hope for. It's an idea. A lot of people get upset with that. You hear people say, I do step 3 every day. Well, it doesn't ask you to do it. Nothing wrong with that. But the idea is, when I asked my wife to marry me, I've asked her once, and she said yes. We got married, and I don't ask her every morning when I wake up, we still married? We still married. Like, we made a commitment. So we see that step 3 is an idea that I'm going into this willingly to have this relationship with this power that's going to unify. So what happens here in Canada, we don't have a draft, we volunteer. I see the benefit of this union or this relationship than not having it. So I'm making a conscious decision. I'm not surrendering to it. I'm formulating this idea that I need this relationship if I'm going to survive. Right or wrong? Right?
Right.
So they talk about here. So let's look at, we're now at step 3. Let's read that.
We were now at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker, as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee.
So wait. Slow it down. You guys are always in a hurry through these prayers. Slow it down. God, I offer myself. Offer. When somebody offers you something, is that if you go to somebody's house and they're offering you, hey, would you like some coffee? Would you like some tea? It's an offer. Yes. Reciprocate. Yes, I would like. It's the offering. If you offer somebody something, it's a willingness to. Yeah, right or wrong. Now, if you go to somebody's place and says, "Give me your wallet," it's a lot different. Anybody know the difference between a demand and an offer? So here, it's a relationship. It's like I offer myself, okay, you know what? I see I need to do this thing. I'm open to doing this thing, right? I see the benefit of it. I don't have to, right? It's a conscious decision to pursue this thing. There's no punishment. I'm not under any kind of anything. It's like, you know what? It's not a shotgun marriage, right? It's like I see the benefit of this relationship. So I offer, here, okay, I'm in. Go ahead.
To build with me and to do with me as thou wilt.
We're going to find out what that is. And so far, right now, we agreed to do the rest of the course of action to get the experience of this thing that's being offered. Not the knowledge of it, the experience of it. A lot of people have the mechanics of going through the steps, but never been through the steps. Why do you say that? Because they don't talk about the experience. They talk about the mechanics of it. You hear people talk about the mechanics of doing the steps. The steps are not meant to be done compartmentalized. We go through this process to have this experience. Once we have this experience, the steps aren't compartmentalized anymore. Interesting, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will.
Take away. Yeah, that ain't happening now. Right? Remember our biggest problem on page 6, driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion. Because if you were able to experience this now, would you need to do anything else?
No.
And you hear all these people, I did in step 3, oh boy, all the promises are coming true at step 3. There's only one promise done in step 3 is, if you don't continue on, you get the promise of step 1 again.
Relapse.
Okay, go ahead.
Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life.
So those of us who've been through this realize now this is a summary of the whole process. It's a circle, right? Which is step 11 and 12. By the time you're experiencing step 11 and working with other people in 12, you've completed the idea being presented in step 3. So what confirms step 3 of this idea of this relationship is actually step 11.
Yeah.
When I get to 11, I see the things that the ideas that were being presented in step 3 come to fruition. It comes to like I come to rely on it. So let's go down here where it says the wording, of course, was quite optional. So a lot of people get upset with it's not an idea. How many people had that voice going through their head here a bit? Come on. I seen the look on some of your people's faces. Draw it in a bit. What do you mean it's an idea? Well, this is the fun part. Let's see what the book says about this idea being presented in step 3. Everybody go down here. It says the wording was, right? The wording
The wording was, of course, quite optional, so long as we expressed the idea.
What idea? Of these things. It's an idea. It's a hope for. I'm hoping for these things to experience these things. Whoa, how many people just had a whoa moment here? Huh? I see some of you are almost smiling again. Okay, so let's... And it happens because we hear this rhetoric, we hear this stuff so many times, but when we actually read it, we have a hard time with what we're reading and hearing because all this shit we hear in the fellowship that is not book-based. We're getting back to the language of Alcoholics Anonymous that's in this book. If they talk the common language and they all agreed on this language and then terminology and they put this together 4 editions later, it's saying the same thing. And if we want to be productive in helping carrying this message, we better learn this language because it's not carrying my ideas and my message, is it?
No.
Right? So how many people do you think are dying from the message not being carried in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous as the first priority of first line presentations that should be offered to people coming here dying of alcoholism? So I don't know how many people I've talked to over and over where they found something that works for them for now. You don't know if it works for you. Remember what the odds are. What are the odds? Of alcoholics, not of people, of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried. 50% got sober at once. So that's saying of how many people are here? 86? Say 90 people of yous that really try, right? 50% of yous are going to make it to the time you pass from this earth. The other 50%, 25% of you are going to have a couple relapses. But you'll get back on the horse and remain sober for the rest of your life. And then there's a percentage of you who will show improvement. That means you get 4 years, relapse again, get 3 years, relapse again, and then somewhere along the line you'll die from this illness, but AA has prolonged your life. Of those who really tried, not everybody that came here. Because a lot of people that come here don't need to do this, and you hear it. They don't drink no matter what. Under any and all conditions, they don't drink. You hear those people?
Yep.
We're not those people. Under any and all conditions, we think it's a good idea to drink. Anybody like here? Anybody there?
Oh, yeah.
We don't need a condition. Our condition's a condition that needs conditioning. Why did you do that? Good question. But we know why we do that, because we have a malady, right? Okay, so let's go over here. We're getting into the good part here. So, starting at the beginning, on the bottom of page 83, we made our decision. We understand the idea that's being presented here. I'm going to utilize this prayer because it reminds me of the commitment of what I'm doing here, willing to get any lengths. So I'm going to utilize this prayer as I go through my 4th step. It's the beginning of an idea of practicing something that don't make sense, is the idea of prayer. So I'm just going to utilize this right now because it's asking me and it reminds me of certain things that I need to do. So next, at the bottom of page 63. Go ahead.
Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning.
The first step of bringing about this solution is actually step 4. How many people just had another moment? Right? So if you bring your car to a mechanic and the engine's kind of having a problem with the engine, what's the first step in having that problem fixed is when he lifts the hood and starts wrenching on it. It's not until then it's still sitting in the parking lot, but you know what the problem is, you know what the solution is, and you made a decision for them to fix it because you can't fix it yourself. But as long as it's still in the parking lot and not in one of the bays with the hood up, with them starting the process that they discussed with you, when that hood is up and they start working on it, they've started the process. Until that happens, you're still in the same problem. 1, 2, and 3. Now you start at step 4 to bring about the solution that you agreed necessary in step 2. Yes? No? We are good with that so far? So the first step in bringing about this process is actually 4. So if you've been doing 3 and you've been doing nothing, you're not doing nothing. You haven't done 3. Your decision is you don't need to do the rest of the work. Step 3 is, do I need to do the rest of the work or don't I?
Yeah.
Go ahead. That was fun.
which many of us had never attempted.
True. Right? Which many of us never attempted. Like later, we all about easier, softer ways. Everybody, you listen to all these people, some of these guys, old timers, been around forever. They talk about doing shit that would kill most of us, but it seems to be working for them. If you're not using the book, then you're not using our process. Right? We only offer one process as the program of recovery. Anybody understand what that is now? It's the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the only thing we endorse in Alcoholics Anonymous. Anything other than that is not AA, and you're killing alcoholics. And if your sponsor's trying to sell you some other shit, tell them I said, stop killing people. And you can direct them. I'll give you my phone number later, and I'll tell them for you.
Or you can bring them here next week and Sunday and Monday. And
because I spent 11 years in and out dying of alcohol, and 27 years puking green bile, my family crying, my sister crying, people just beyond any kind of hope for me. And then somebody carried this message, and the result of the message of Alcoholics Anonymous being offered to me was the whole point of Alcoholics Anonymous, that people like us could come here and find a solution to a problem that was killing us, and we could be reunited with our families, our friends, and back with society, and live a life beyond anything we could ever imagine. My wife, my daughter, the life I live is direct proportionate to a responsible member carrying this message. How do you know they're carrying this message? They're showing you out of the book. If they're not showing you out of the book, then they're not carrying this message, and they're fucking with your life. Sorry, I don't usually swear like that, right? Right? That's the truth.
Yep.
Because how a lot of these people get sober in AA will kill an alcoholic. Right? That's why we only offer one solution, and it's endorsed in this book. You can do whatever you like, but if your life's on the line, how many people would like to know the difference between a life jacket and a sink?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want the person who's saving my life throwing me a life jacket, not a sink. And I want them to know the difference too. How do you know they know the difference? They're showing you this. Therefore, when we were approached with whom the problem had been solved, they're going to show you the exact same thing, so we're connected to the first 100 men and women. That's who's really sponsoring us. The sponsor's job is to bring you to the lineage of the book. So who's really sponsoring me is the collective experience of the first 100 men and women, and since thousands, because what are we using as the basis? We're using the book. You go to a welding shop, you go to a doctor's office, they all use the same material to allow them to have the same experience. True or false?
True.
You go to a dentist and you see in a couple, books up there on how to fix engines. You kind of say, "Have you studied?" "Oh, no, but it's the same thing, just welding or working on teeth." Same. Anyways, moving on. Go ahead.
Your decision was a vital and crucial step. It could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us.
At once. When? After our decision. Why is it paramount that we get busy? Because we're afflicted with alcoholism. Who's the only person that don't know when they're going to relapse again?
Me.
Us. Because remember, we've agreed that step one's beyond our ability to control. Alcoholism is beyond our pay grade. We agreed in step one that the promise of step one is I'm going to relapse again 100% outside of divine help. I'm beyond human aid. If I'm beyond human aid, that's why they close the chapter and more about alcohol. Once more, the alcoholic has no effective mental defense against the first drink. His defense must come from what? A power greater than himself. Where do we find that power? Through this process. So we are in the book talks about, I'm not going to get into it. They say if you're alcoholic, we already know you're going to relapse again. We know what your fate is. We doubt you can stay sober a year. Some will be drunk after making these resolutions. We already know that because we understand alcoholism. We already know what your fate is outside of spiritual help, that you're going to die an alcoholic death. The book says that about step one. That's why most people don't like using the book. They like the fantasy idea of self working on self, fixing self, and it takes a lot of relapses for us to realize, or a gun in our mouth, or rope, or the idea, right, that there's something seriously wrong with me. Yeah, I'm in trouble, so go ahead. At once. To do what? What's the point here? Go ahead. Say that again.
Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us.
Blocking us. That's what we're looking for, is the things that block us. I don't know what those things are. It's not selfish, inconsiderate, dishonest. That's the human trait. If my sobriety was dependent on how, like anybody suffer from selfish, inconsiderate, a little dishonesty here and there? Huh? So if you got loaded every time you're a little selfish, dishonest, and inconsiderate, we'd be a room full of drunk people right now.
We'd be loaded every 15 minutes.
I mean, just hang on to those chips. No, just... Okay, go. So I'm looking for the things that are blocking me, but I don't know what they are. Did they ask me what they are?
No.
No, have they asked me anything yet? Have they asked me my opinion on anything?
No, they don't care what you got to say right now.
Yeah, have they got... So we've been talking for a while. What do you think? No, okay, so they're not gonna, so relax. Okay, go ahead.
Our liquor was but a symptom. So we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke.
True or false? So they're giving an idea here, right? They're saying if you're going to be successful, they have to have something in place for them to be successful. Yes or no?
Yep.
There's something in place that allows them to be successful. So look at how they're introducing us to this new idea here, right? Okay, go ahead.
Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process.
Isn't that interesting? This is kind of going back to page 54 on our belief system and the things that we spend worship and our ideas on, or where we spend our energy. Kind of interesting, right? But I don't know this fact-finding, fact-facing thing yet, right? Taking this commercial inventory, I don't know how to successfully look at myself in the way necessary to find take corrective action through prayer meditation. So I'm mostly stuck on page 62 by being driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, right?
Yeah.
Because I can't see past that. So most of my life is based on hindsight, not foresight. I'm always analyzing things after they happen. Anybody like that here? I can't believe this is happening. Why is this happening? Why am I always in conflict with people, places? Because I don't have a solution to my human dilemma, not my alcoholism. We don't treat alcoholism. We have a treatment for it. Big difference, right? Huge. So what I'm suffering from is the human dilemma that I have yet to find a suitable answer for that they're going to present here. So they're saying that unless a business or commercial has a fact-finding process, they usually go broke. Interesting, eh? So what do you think they'd be alluding to for commercial inventory or business inventory? You think they'd be maybe hinting at us?
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret.
Yeah, you know what? So when you understand this, you need to tell me that you have a process for me that if I put it into place or implement it in this idea of fact-finding, fact-facing process, this inventory thing, the same way people do it in business, where you have it for my human condition, that I'll be successful, and that you help me point out these things within inside of myself is defeating me? Oh no, I can't do that. That sounds so scary. What do you mean? You're telling me you got a recipe for success here that I'll experience something beyond that I've ever experienced that I've always hoped for, and you got the recipe for that? What? Yeah, I'll take it. It's like saying like this. Okay, you know what? You see everybody walking a marathon and really enjoying themselves, but you got 2 rocks in your shoe. Anybody ever walk with a rock in their shoe here? How many people's walked with a rock in their shoe? But you don't want to stop because you don't want to get behind everybody. So what you're trying to do is get the rocks between your toes. How many people's done that here? Walk and try to get or they tap on their foot so the rock goes at the end of their toe. The whole walk is concentrated on the rock.
Yeah.
Where are you focused on? You're not enjoying the walk anymore. All you're thinking about is keeping that thing manageable. You're missing the whole thing. And somebody goes, hey, what's the matter? I got these rocks in my shoe. Why don't you take them out? I don't know. Fuck, stop. Undo your shoe, take the rock out, and let's start walking again. Oh, no. That's what they're offering here with the 4-step. They're saying, hey, you're walking with a limp. What's going on here? Well, kind of see the segue is kind of funny when you look at it that way. Okay, go ahead.
If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values.
And we're illusionists. We fool ourselves all the time. How many illusionists here?
Oh, yeah.
How many magicians? We're the greatest illusion. Look at this illusion that I've created for myself. What it takes is reality to smash the idea that this shit isn't happening at all. What I think is happening is not actually happening. Anybody like that here?
Oh, yes.
The biggest illusion is how many people were the last ones to know they had a drinking problem, but everybody around them already knew.
Yep.
How many people were surprised that everybody knew those mints reflected a shot of vodka? Bubblegum mints, nobody knows. Everybody knows, but nobody's just saying anything to you anymore. How many people thought they were fooling everybody around them?
Oh, yes.
And then you get a bit sober and they go, we know. Okay, that's like our recovery. We're the last ones to know. So we're going to discover what everybody else already knows. So the only person that's being held a secret to is you. Because everybody already knows. You're the only one that don't know. No, what about this shit in your life that's causing your problems? Anyways, it's funny now. It wasn't funny when I was doing it, but it's funny now. Okay, go ahead.
We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure.
So what are we looking for? The things, right? First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup what caused our failure. They're going to tell us precisely what those things are. Keep note of that, because later in 6 and 7, we're going to reiterate that. A lot of people get really confused what's in the book because there's too much influence from treatment centers and these big speakers that talk shit that has nothing to do with the book, but they sound so good. Then they get all these other people believing soon there's a whole fellowship of people talking shit that has nothing to do with the book. And then when we try to get back to the book, who's the problem? We're the problem. I could show you what I'm talking about. Can you show me what you're talking about? Oh, don't talk to those people. They're crazy. We're the right kind of crazy. Anybody hear these big speakers? A lot of their talk isn't book-based at all. It's treatment center-based. They use terminology that you cannot find within our program of recovery and ideas and all. I drink no matter what. You hear these people, I stay sober under any and all conditions. That's not us. That's not book-based. No matter what, I don't pick up. That's not us. I'm working on 10, 11, and 12. That's not us. Right? So there's a lot of language happening in our fellowship that is not the language of Alcoholics Anonymous. So what we're doing in this group, and it's happening in a lot of groups, is we're getting back to the language of Alcoholics Anonymous. Why is that so important? Because it saves lives. And if your life is in a balance, and if you can't afford another relapse, and if you can't, and the people around you can't, then you're in the right place. Come walk with us, and we guarantee you an experience beyond anything you could ever imagine. You'll be amazed before you're halfway through, not somewhat thrilled. Okay, go ahead.
Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations.
Manifestation, how it presents itself, these things that are defeating us. So we're getting to the end here of the exercise that we're going to bring forward on the starting of our 4th. So we get these ideas and all that. So we're looking for the things in ourselves which had defeated us. Yes or no?
Yes.
We're looking for the common manifestation. The common things, these big ticket items. Because if you learn how to deal with these big ticket items through applying this recipe, how will the smaller ticket items fare with this recipe?
Easy.
So I need to learn the recipe. I need to learn what they're talking about of the removal of these things about the stock and trade and the removal of them so I could have a successful business. Who's the business they're talking about? Me. If I'm going to have a different experience, I need to learn a different process on how I look at things and how I view things and how I process it. I have a part of my brain that's a little defective that don't process it the same way other people process it. So I need a new way of running information through my conscience or through my thinking, through spiritual principles to give me a different result. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep, 100%.
Okay. Go ahead.
Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease.
Okay, hold it. So some people read that and go, oh, see, we have a threefold disease. See, it says that. It doesn't say that. So is this spiritual disease from alcoholism? That's why I asked you to have a piece of paper here and a pen. You write down yes or no. Yes, my spiritual disease is from alcoholism, and that's a third, right? That's a third symptom in alcohol. We hear that. How many people has heard here? We have a threefold illness.
Oh, yeah.
Has it said it anywhere yet?
No.
No, that's, again, treatment. That idea comes from a treatment center, right? Oh, I was spiritually sick, then I became alcoholic. No, they're saying here that the spiritual sickness is not in regards to alcoholism. How many people just had an oh moment here? Come on, be honest. Because I know it was steel on steel when I went through this, kicking and screaming. But I went through it. 11 years in and out, 2 treatment centers. The first one was so good I went back for a second. Okay, so what they're saying here is, let's read it slow and look at the wording. Go ahead. Resentment.
Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else.
What are we talking about?
Resentment.
Resentments. They're not changing the conversation here. From it. From what? From the resentment. From the abscess stuck on my consciousness. This is like an abscess stuck to my consciousness. This energy field within inside of me that's poisoning me. From it, from this poison, from this resentment, from this thing that's inside of me that I'm carrying, I'm killing myself with this resentment that I've attached somewhere along the line. My inability to cope with it. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. All forms of it. So what they're saying here is my reaction to life is being poisoned or kind of tainted from these things that I carry from my past. So my past is still leading my lunch and determining how I respond, think, and react to today. And if I'm going to be successful, I need to be free of these things. And the first thing I need to be free of is what? These resentments and these. So we're going to get the first recipe here, okay?
From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically.
So they say, right there, see, so we become spiritually sick. Why? Because we're not dealing with life. If you're being plagued with resentments, you're not living life because you're getting drunk all the time, you're lying, you're cheating, and you're spending money and you're fooling around, and you're doing shit you're not supposed to. Would you not be a little toxic? Would you not be a little septic? Would you not be afraid of what the world and everybody around you knows about you? And when you're going to find out who's looking, isn't that a form of toxicity? Who formulated that? You, from your inability to manage and control your life. This is the outcome of alcoholism, untreated. All these things. So if I was free of resentment, would I be having these problems?
No.
Interesting, right? So now the human condition is starting to kick my ass. That what I used to use alcohol for, but alcohol isn't working anymore because the consequences are gone beyond the place where I'm okay with. So I need to find a different solution to deal with life. Okay, go ahead.
In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry.
That's it. So what we're going to do this week is you're going to sit with a piece of paper like this and a pen. You're going to open your book, look at the 3rd step prayer. And then what you're going to ask God is for direction to reveal all these things that you're harboring or carrying. Ask yourself who you were resentful at, pissed off with, who you were pissed off with, who you were angry with, and are. So that means you write a list, whatever comes to mind. Sam, Brenda, Mom, Dad, the neighbor's dog, foreman, my grade 2 school teacher, my high school teacher, the 52 division, gang squad in Toronto, on and on and on. A couple of groups I hung out with, right? Right? Rival gangs. So whatever comes to mind. And then, oh, Brenda. Oh, no, I'm not mad at Brenda. Did Brenda come to mind? So write it down. Right? And then what happens is it's not about analyzing the stuff in your brain. It's about analyzing what comes up and seeing it. It's kind of like anybody have a channel changer at home? You know, when you put on all those channels, come up with all those different subtitles to that channel, it doesn't tell you what to show you. If you were to just write down everything you've seen on that screen, like your brain's the screen, your consciousness is going to let you know stuff. So if somebody comes to mind, people, places, things, just write it down, and you'll know why later. It didn't mean, oh, I've dealt with it. A lot of people say, oh, I've already done it for, and I've already dealt with this person. Did that person come back to mind? Yes, then write it down. There's still an attachment to it. Because if there was no attachment to it at a subconscious level, would they come back to mind?
No.
So your consciousness is trying to, anybody ever cook soup here or gold? What they do with gold is they heat it up and all the impurities come to the surface. And then so what you're doing here is you're asking something greater than you for direction to show you of these absence or these things that you're carrying that come to the surface. How free do you want to be? Even if it seems stupid, you write it down. Does that kind of make sense? Now, what happens if I start living the story? Well, what happens is then I stop and do the third step prayer. Because I remind myself the point of the exercise that's found on page 64 is to be rid of these things that are eating my lunch, that I'm still carrying, these abscesses on my spirit that are cutting me off from source. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, it does.
Right? So I need these things gone so I can be free in today. So it sounds pretty cool, like, and I don't know how else to say that, right? It's like anybody remember when they partied a couple weeks and they walked into the kitchen and it was a total shit show, and you did like there was like 2 inches of grease and you wouldn't even want to put your hand in the sink, so you avoided it. Nobody lived like that here, right? Anybody? And people would tell us first thing you need to do is empty the sink, right, and take all the dishes and just stack them beside the sink. Yes or no?
Yes.
Right? And then start the process. Even though it looked so much, just do it piecemeal. That's what you're doing here. If it gets overwhelming, stop. Take a big breath. Come back. What's the purpose of this thing? To be rid of these things. To have a new experience in my life. To get access to this power. Right? So I don't have to be doing this over and over and over again. Because my fate is I'm going to end up drinking if I don't do this. This is the only thing that stands between me and dying of alcoholism. Because I don't have 2 alternatives now. One is to accept spiritual help, and the other is to go on to the bitter end, because I'm already under the lash of alcoholism. I'm treated at this stage of the game. So that's it, guys. Just kind of write the list. And you should have like a good list. Like, I mean, if you're over 25 and you haven't done this, you're looking at 100 and something people, places and things. Good 70. If you only got 3, you're full of shit. I'll tell you that right now. So, put me down. Tony. I make a lot of people's list, right? So anyways, we're going to have a discussion after this meeting closes. We'll close with the third step prayers. And, I just, hopefully it made a lot of sense what we're talking about, some of the highlights. And I know I say a lot of stuff that seems a little harsh, but we need to do that to get each other's attention. Because we don't listen to very soft messages very well, do we, people? So we'll close with the third step prayer, and then we can have open discussion for those that wish. Joe, you gone? Are you still here?
Joe's gone. I'll read it, Tony.
Okay, at a pace that we could enjoy it, please.
Not a problem.
So what's the first requirement making this thing happen?
God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me, and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
May the force be with you. Live long and prosperous. So